Hello, hi, welcome. So today I am going to be crocheting a bag. It's going to be just a simple, small crossbody bag, one strap. And I feel like this will be a great first or second project for someone who's a beginner, who's kind of started to figure out the starting chain and adding like doing your first chain, second chain, all that kind of stuff, who's ready to actually make a real thing. When I was first starting out, I really struggled to do patterns because you're still kind of making sure you do there's not really that like force of habit with the hook on like where to put your hook in and when to pull yarn and pull your yarn through and everything. So you're dealing with trying to like memorize all that while trying to count. I personally found that really difficult. I'm sure there's a lot of other people. So today we're going to be doing without the counting, and this is typically how I crochet in general. I've been crocheting for a little less than a year. Not as much as I would like, not as much as I know some people when they get into crochet, they crochet all the time, but I've definitely been slowly getting into it. But yes, I don't typically use patterns, and I've had quite a lot of success, so I'm going to show you guys a way to make a bag without a pattern or without counting. So first, if you want to make this exact one with the exact yarn I'm using Loops and Thread from Michaels. This is like a really pretty purple color, which is why I picked it. This is 285 yards. I don't know if this will be enough. I just grabbed it just to start. So if you're looking to make this, just be prepared. You may need more yarn, but we will see. You want a 5mm hook. I have 5.25. It really doesn't make a difference. I'm sure there's some people who will argue with me, but for me, it has yet to make much of a difference. You'll also need a yarn needle. I don't know if that's the proper name, but that's what I call it. You can also get this from Michaels. And a piece of printer paper. This is going to replace having to count, and I'll show you how I personally do it. So let's just get started. All right, so we have our yarn, and you're just gonna do your little thing to start and put my hook through here. Tighten it. Don't do it too tight. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes I have done while doing any project, is doing my starting chain, or really any chain in general, too tight. So we're gonna do our starting chain. Like I said, don't do it too tight. Obviously, you don't want it super loose either, because you are going to be putting, if you're like me, a phone, keys. My phone is also my wallet. I feel like I shouldn't publicly acknowledge that, but it is. And probably other important things. Now, with this yarn, it does have quite a bit of stretch. So once you get into it and start doing your first chain into it, it is going to stretch. So I am basically not going to do the full length of the paper. I'm going to go to about here on the piece of paper, because like I said, it will stretch. So I'm going to finish my starting chain, and then we'll get back and discuss the next chain. All right, so as you can see, I have finished my starting chain. And I will go ahead and apologize. I'm recovering from a cold, so if certain words are a little hard to hear or understand, that's because I'm still a little congested. I did have about 1/2 inch from the corner, because like I said, this will stretch some. Now, this part of the paper is really just for your length, so you can get the right size. Because once you get going, as long as you make sure you hit the spaces you're supposed to with your next chain, it should make a nice rectangle shape in general. So I'm going to do a 1/2 double crochet, and we're going to go into not the first, so this is the one you're in. You're going to go into the first one right here and do your little 1/2 double. If you're not familiar with the 1/2 double, you just chain over, go into the next loop, pull through, and then pull through all the way. The 1/2 double is my personal favorite. I don't know why. I feel like it's just the one I tend to stick with the most. And we're gonna do that all the way through to the very end of this one. So I will pop back in once we get there. All right, so I'm through my first chain. I am going to finish it off like that. Pull the yarn through, and just for like reference of, especially if you've just like really played around with crochet and haven't really crocheted anything, this is why a lot of people count, because as you can see how much it's stretched. I was about here and it's stretched by almost 2 inches, I would say. So that's why I always, when using this method, subtract a little bit, because it does stretch quite a bit. That's something when I was first starting out was constantly a struggle with me. I would always have to go back to my starting chain to fix it because of the stretch of the yarn. Okay, so we've gone all the way through. This is where our start was, and we're gonna tie that off and go up to the top. Not actually tie it off, but that's how I think of it in my head. And we're gonna go in the very first hole here to get a nice even edge. Try not to do it too tight, because that's, once again, something I always tend to do. And it's not gonna look even at first, so don't panic if your edges look a little rounded or not super squared off, because with yarn, as you can see, not only does it stretch, it kind of gets like a curve to it at first, and it takes a little bit of work before it flattens out. So we're just going to keep going into the second chain here. This yarn's a little annoying because your hook will get tangled in some of the strands, but we'll just keep going with this until we get to the end of this one. I also am going to come back real quick and chime in, because this was something someone did not explain the very first time I was crocheting. I was watching a beginner tutorial and they did not explain, which I might be over explaining or talking down by doing this, but how it has the 2 notches in the top. So when I first started crocheting, I only went through the front one, but on this, you definitely want to go through the both. So the V on top, you're going straight through the middle. I know some patterns won't require that, but you're gonna go through this hole right here and get the entire V there. Oops, that wasn't just like that. So I just felt like I would clear that up, because I know some tutorials don't include it, especially when you're a beginner. Depending on the first couple things you watched, you may have seen where people only use the front or the back one. So there's that. All right, so I finished my second chain, and as you can see, it's shrinking back down to the size a little bit. It's not going to get any smaller past this, but definitely when you add your second chain with this yarn, it will get a little smaller. We're at the end now. So typically, to get your flat edges here, you want to go into this nub, which for me always is a pain in the butt, but that's why we'll do this one nice and loose and tie that off. It is going to kind of have a slight, not perfectly flat edge at first, but it will even out as you go along. We're going to do the little loop there and go, instead of going into this one, we are going to go into that one right there, and then that already flattens out the edge. So going on to row 3, chain 3, whatever you prefer. I know some people call these chains, and then some people call doing this a chain. I don't know. I just think to myself while I do them. So I may switch up wording and stuff. This is my first tutorial, which I should have included at the start of this video, but I didn't. So guys, definitely have some grace with me. I'm going to be learning alongside you guys of how to do this and the best way to teach and educate on this. So I'm going to go through row 3 here, and as you can see, we have a long way to go. I'm going to guess this is 3. We're probably going to have about 30 rows. So let's just get going. And since we have the basics, I might do like a sped up video of me doing some, or we might just jump ahead a little bit and see what's going on. All right, so I've gotten a little ways done. I've probably worked on it for about 30 minutes off and on when I just have a little extra time. Just looking at it, I'm close to halfway through, but I did, since this is my first time doing this, I know there's like a few things I should probably answer, so I'm gonna check it. I'm checking in to show you what I've done so far, and then kind of addressing the paper and where that really comes in and why this is what I do rather than writing, like doing numbers and stuff. So to address the paper aspect of it, so as you can see, it is quite a bit longer than the paper, and you may be like, well, what's the point of the paper? So this is more so for reference. When you do counting, obviously it's to reference the size you're gonna make, and I wanted to make a bag about the size of a piece of printer paper. Now, as you can see, it is quite a bit longer than that, which is totally fine because I wanted to make a small bag. This will still be a small bag. But other than that, the other things that's really nice to have the paper for is to make sure that you're not slightly curving up, which I have been so famous for since I don't use patterns and stuff. You can check with both sides that you are not curving out or in. Of course, this little edge is always a problem for me, the starting edge. I don't know if anyone else who crochets can relate, but it can make sure that your edges are even, that you're not dropping stitches anywhere, because that's another reason why patterns have numbers, is to make sure you're not accidentally dropping stitches, because obviously going in every individual hole, there's always a chance of accidentally dropping one. I do it all the time, and while I don't crochet as much as some people, I do crochet like quite a bit. Now, I just wanted to address that and kind of show how large mine has gotten, and this is about the size it'll stay. It kind of ebbs and goes, but as you can see, this is as big as it'll get. So if you're watching this video from the start and like before you start it all and you're watching it from start to finish, then gonna do it, I would recommend going to about like 3 inches short on your paper if you want it to be about the size of the paper. But yeah, I figured I would take a second to address why using the piece of paper if I'm not making it the size of the paper, because I still have reference points of flat edges. I still have reference points about how big I'm gonna make, and because it's a rectangle, I am able to still make something without counting because I am going in every hole, and this just keeps you accountable in some ways that you're not dropping stitches. All right, so as you can see, I have finished here. I have made my full bag. Let me move this and hold it up. So this is either going to be the front or back of my bag. It's a pretty good size. It's still like smallish, but still a good size. So we're going to tie off the end here, and basically I'm going to take my scissors. Now normally I leave this end yarn like long enough where I can weave the ends together, but since I am going to be weaving all 3 sides together, I am just going to use a whole separate piece of yarn. So we're going to just pull it through, and then this first one's done. So I'm going to get jump started on the other half. All right, so I'm going to do my starting loop, which how I do it typically is I just wrap it around 2 fingers, make a hole, twist, pull through. That's how I make it. I'm pretty sure there's like 100 ways to do it. And I'm going to do my starting chain. Now, if you were smart, unlike me, you would have marked on your piece of paper where your last one was. I know about where my last one was, so we're just going to make our starting chain to about that point and go from there. All right, so here's where the piece of paper comes in handy, because obviously now I have a couple more starting chains to do. So I'm going to do those, but this is where it comes in handy, because we're going to compare our starting chain right now, which is about where my last one was, with the finished product of the other one. And as you can see, it's about 2 inches longer because of the stretch. So if I were to try and measure this out with this, it wouldn't be quite right. I would end up making a much larger second piece. So that's where the piece of paper also comes in, is I'm able to gauge where I put the last piece compared to this, because yarn stretches. That's also why people count, but that's also why we do this. So as you can see, we have, because I started at the same spot, the second one is going to be the same length as this one. So it's just currently not flat yet. But I'm just going to basically do the same thing that I did with this one and do all my rows and keep checking back now with the original piece to make sure they're the same size. Okay, so I have my 2 equal halves right here, 1 and 2. So this is going to be the front and the back, and we are going to eventually stitch them together, but I'm going to wait till the end because that's, you know, tedious, and I don't really feel like doing that right now. So next we are going to do the strap. Now for the strap, obviously we're going to do a regular starting chain here. Let me try and set my camera back up. There we go. So we're going to do a regular starting chain. Don't need that long of a end here. Now I am gonna need some more yarn. I'm 99% sure, because I highly doubt I can do a crossbody strap with this, but if you're only doing a shoulder strap, you might have enough yarn in just a single skein, so that's good to know. But I'm going to be doing crossbody straps, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do my starting chain and just kind of check across, like, to see if it's going to be a length I like. Obviously, as we saw with this, the yarn does stretch quite a bit as you work with it, so definitely keep that in mind as you're like measuring out your starting chain. But I am just gonna go until it's pretty comparable to like an actual bag I have. I don't want it to be too long because I want it to be where I can have it on either like just my shoulder or crossbody, but I might use up most of this yarn by the time I get to an actual crossbody, so we'll come back and check in once I get to there. All right, so I have my starting chain done for my strap. Now I'm only doing 1 strap. If you would really like to, you can do 2. I think 1 strap's just going to be enough, so I'm going to put it in half to kind of get an idea of how long it will be. Obviously this is going to stretch, so in reality it's probably going to be down to here. I could do it longer, but I want it to be shorter because, like I said, I'm also going to wear it like this. So that's about right. As we saw with the actual like bag, the yarn stretched quite a bit, so I feel like I don't want to go too long and have it dangling down super long. So we're going to go back and start on our first chain. So I'm going to do exactly what I did for the bag. I'm just going to go into this. Obviously there's this one, but that's the one your loop's coming out of, so you go here, and we're going to start our half double over again and go all the way through. Now with this, I'm going to start out by doing 3 rows to see what it looks like For how many rows you want for your straps is really gonna depend on how much stuff you're gonna carry. So I recently made this big tote bag, which you can't see, and I only did 2 rows on it, and this is a pretty large tote bag because I was running out of yarn, and I already had bought 4 skeins of this yarn and did not want to buy another. It really needs probably double this because even with the little bit I carry in it, sometimes I'll carry my yarn in it, my keys and my wallet, and then other times I might have a book in it, and it's already pulling on the straps pretty bad. So this is a much larger and just naturally heavier tote from the material. This is a lot lighter, but the only thing is this obviously makes shorter rows than that one did because this yarn is just smaller in general. That's thick yarn, this is medium yarn. So I'm gonna start with 3 rows and then we'll check back to see if that feels like it might hold this bag together. All right, so delightful news, I did my 3 rows here, which if you're gonna put quite a bit of weight in your bag, I would definitely recommend doing more than this. This is gonna hold for how much I'm gonna put in here, but if you are somebody who might carry like a book or 2, maybe a tablet in here, definitely probably gonna want at least 1 or 2 more rows just to give you some extra strength. But yeah, and shockingly, I have yarn left over. I have more than enough to sew this all together. So that's what we're gonna jump into right now. All right, so first thing is I picked which sides I want to be the outside of the bag, and these I have the outside, the inside of the bag and the inside of the bag. So if you accidentally ended up with any like little flaws, which just with the yarn itself here, oh, right here, oh, nope, right here, just with the yarn itself, sometimes when you buy a thing of yarn, it'll have where it connected stuff, so I want that on the inside of the bag, and I also want on the inside of the bag the seam, so we want to have the 2 insides of the bag on the outside, and what we want is the outside on the inside, if that makes sense, to start with. And then gonna take, so I'm gonna do section by section, so I'm gonna do like one side, just so I don't have extensive amounts of yarn. So I'm gonna basically measure out double, well, just to be safe, we're gonna measure out triple the length of the side, cut that, and then this is what we're gonna use to stitch the sides together. So I readjusted here. I'm gonna get my yarn through the needle. There we go. I'm gonna tie it off so we keep it on here. And then basically, I'm just gonna go in from the very top and start weaving it together like I'm sewing, and go right here. Actually, you know what? We're gonna start from the bottom because that will keep the ugly seams once again on the inside. So we're gonna go there, and I'm just gonna take the yarn and tie it off. I'm sure there's dozens of other ways people do this, but this is just how I do it. It also gives a place to connect your next section, and then I'm just gonna weave through, I should probably move this paper. Just gonna weave through every section I can here to keep it as closely knitted as possible. And if I didn't end up picking up enough yarn, I can easily tie in more yarn. So I'm just gonna go back and forth. I'm gonna go on this very top, let me see, can you see that? The very top row across and just pull through. to weave it in here. And make sure you don't accidentally overlap because you will lose your stitch. But go through that very top row and pull all the way through. It kind of gets easier to see as you go. And it is difficult when you have like these side loops right here. So if you rather, you can skip that, or you can also not just do the front two, but how this has double right here, making sure you guys can see that. Go through the two top and just stitch it all together to make your bag, not have a huge hole through it. So I'm going to go all the way up to the top. All right, so I'm at the end of my thing. This is how I personally tie it off. Once again, this is one of those things where there's so many ways to do it. So I leave this open, I go through a separate section, pull through, then pull through here. Oops, sorry for hitting you guys. And so that doesn't want to pull all the way through there. But before I fully tie it off, just to show you guys, we got a nice seam on the outside of the bag now. And then I just, especially since this is a bag, I'm just gonna go in double whammy in here and make sure we're nice and really tied off, that we're not gonna have any rips there. So, and I'm gonna cut it a little shorter and weave that in. So that's the first seam, and I'm gonna do that with all the rest. I basically didn't have to use that much yarn. So basically just do 2 lengths like this of yarn to kind of get an idea of how much you need. So like I'll do 1, then fold it over and do, that way I have extra 2 to be able to weave into the other side, and then do the same for the bottom. And I'm just gonna stitch this together, and then we'll come back to stitch the strap on. All right, sorry for the sound in the background. My son's home from school, but I finished off all my seams, and so the bag is currently inside out because I still have to add the straps. So this side of my straps has those, and that's what we're gonna use. And we're gonna also flip the straps to the side we want on the inside, and we're just gonna fasten them in a little bit below the top seam here to get just a little bit more strength to it. There's a lot of yarn here, so you're not really gonna see it. And I'm gonna also fasten all these into the strap to kind of hide them. So I'm gonna do that off camera because this is a mess and it might take me a couple minutes to get through all the yarn. All right, so I still have to weave them all in, but I basically used all the yarn that was already sitting here to super secure this in. You can kind of see where it's attached, but that's okay. That's part of crochet, is you're gonna see different attachments and stuff. All right, so it is done. I'm gonna do like a close-up in a minute, but it's, in my opinion, pretty cute. It's for just like a quick and easy beginner-friendly bag. Obviously, there's a lot of ways to make it a little more unique or special, but I think that looks pretty good. And you can also wear it on your shoulder. This shape would be really cute to have like a shorter strap that you wear more like up here. But yeah, I really like it. And let's go look at it up close. All right, so I had to move to a slightly different location to film my outro because my son said I was interrupting his show. So here is the like finished bag in all its glory. I think it turned out pretty good. This used less than 1 skein of the yarn I showed at the beginning, which I think is absolutely incredible for a beginner pattern. I know, well, it's not really a pattern, but a beginner project, because I know nothing is more discouraging than spending like $20 on a beginner project because of how much the yarn costs and it not turning out So this being only one skein works out great in my opinion, because even if you mess up or it's not perfect, you got the practice in, and this yarn was only $5. So I literally made a crossbody bag for $5. Can't beat it. For time wise, I think it took between like 2.5 to 3 hours to make this personally. It could be less, it could be more, mostly because I don't time myself. I work, I have my son, I go, like, I'm trying to like exercise every day, like go for walks and stuff. My boyfriend comes home, we have dinner, I have other obligations like most people do, and I typically don't have like 3 hours to sit down and crochet at a time. So I crochet for about 5 to 10 minutes, set it down when I get to a stopping point and come back. But yeah, I think if you were to sit down and crochet this, it would probably take 2.5 to 3 hours, which really isn't that bad compared to some of the things I've seen, especially starting out where you're still figuring out how to do stuff. But yeah, this is like the perfect base where you could also embroider on it, or you could do a print into it. You could also add a flap to it, which I would love to do in the future with a button. It's not going to hold a ton, but it's going to work. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I definitely have a ton of work to do personally on filming these. One, I would like to not be sick anymore. That would definitely help. Two, this is definitely going to be a testing thing, so please be nice in your comments down below of what I can do a little bit better, because like I said, this wasn't like necessarily a pattern or anything. It's kind of more of like a guide of how to do this, and I was just kind of making it up as I go, so if you couldn't tell at all. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.